So my personal background is an industrial engineer, and I spent decades in that area, working on a local and international level, and setting up manufacturing operations locally in Australia and overseas, and one thing and another. But I've always been interested in natural health and healing, also agriculture, and one thing and another. And anyway, what happened was about 16 odd years ago, I moved onshore. So I stopped sort of being involved in the industrial engineering side of things, and I went into organic farming environment. And anyway, what I did was I pioneered some techniques of growing, you might say. And what I did was I set up an organic nursery, and what we grew in that nursery was what's called open pollinated, non-hybrid, non-treated heirlooms. And then we went on to do market gardens and one thing and another. So at one stage we were the largest producer of certified organic seedlings on the East Coast. We were doing 220 farmers markets a year. And then through the process of doing that work, because I came from outside of the farming industry, I wasn't sort of, I don't like to use the word tainted, but historically farmers train farmers, so fathers train their sons and so on. And being a bit of a maverick all my life with the way I do things, I don't tend to go to school to learn things. What I do is I get my hands dirty with them and I learn from the mistakes I make. Okay, and then if I reference things if I need them. But my approach has always been very much along the lines of it's my journey, and I want to create a journey that no one else has walked before. Okay, and so anyway, what happened was in 2019 I sold that business. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is a vision that I wrote originally 14 odd years ago. Okay, and that vision was called the UAC, which is the Urban Agricultural Cooperative. All right, and what the Urban Agricultural Cooperative was intended to do was to commercialise the domestic growing of organic vegetables in the home, so that it would provide a feed but also be financial for the people who are actually growing it and so on. Okay. So I wrote that in 2014. When I sold the business in 2019, just before COVID, I was supposed to be going to the Middle East, and I was also supposed to be going to Brazil with some of our technologies and one thing and another. And unfortunately, when this global rollout came into play, because we also are involved in natural health and healing and have been for the last 20 odd years, and we actually deal with a lot of terminal cases and this type of thing, I couldn't get involved with the program because I knew too much about it. Okay. So if there is anyone that has been involved in the program that's in the room today, please don't take offence by my position. Okay, it's just purely based on my own knowledge and all the rest of it, and I'm a rural advocate for choice. Okay, very, very important. In fact, this whole movement is about sovereignty. Okay, I've stood for sovereignty all my life. Some of the work that I've done previously, which most people are not aware, I've been able to do without anyone knowing I was ever involved in it. So to give you an idea of some of those projects I worked on, I was involved in the liberation of East Timor, and getting that whole thing going. It was very successful, thankfully. Another one that I was involved in was some of the work that was done with the West Papua New Guinea people in the Indonesian army, brutalising them. And most recently, around about 2009, we had a big problem with coal seam gas in our region. Because the boys from Gatton came down, Dan Pransky and those guys from Lock the Gate, and so we started a movement basically in the Northern Rivers, and we started as 5, and we ended up with 7,000, and we were successful, and they made a little movie about it, and I was able to bring together that movement, with the various different parties, and no one ever knew I was involved. Unfortunately, in this particular situation, I have to play more of a front-end role in the situation because there's a little bit involved around this situation, right? But ultimately, the take-home for anyone that we're going to introduce this to is that the movement that we're trying to create is not about me, it's about you guys, okay? This is really about, you're living in a system right now where you're very disempowered, okay? A lot of what's being done for you, you could do yourselves as a community, and it would make you much more profitable and so on. So anyway, getting on to exactly what went down in 2019. So this vision lay in the dust for some 14 odd years, and I'm a big meditator, and anyway, one evening when I was in meditation, after I'd sold my business, I couldn't travel overseas, and I thought to myself, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do now, because I had these very big projects and I was going to take one of my daughters around the world with me on them. And anyway, in meditation, the UAC came back on the side of the tent, believe it or not, and it just occurred to me, oh, maybe now's the time for this vision to become a reality. So I went looking for the paper, couldn't find it anywhere, and so what I did was I rewrote it. And before I decided that I was going to go forward with it, what I wanted to do was I wanted to acid test it. So, we had 5,000 contacts in the corporate space, and I was on LinkedIn. And so what I did was I took this document, this white paper, which is on our website. It's about a 20-page document, and I distributed it to 50 executives all over the world and asked them to look at this document, tell me what I was predicting in terms of world famine and the potential issues as a fallout of COVID could potentially result in world famine and anarchy in the various different countries. Right? Anyway, these 50-odd executives, some of them were counter-terrorism fellows, there was bankers, there was financial people, and all the rest of it. We formed a think tank, and they felt that the content of that document was valid. Okay? The reason that they felt that it was valid was because most of the world had been shut down, and coming from a manufacturing and logistics background and all the rest of it, you just can't do that to mainstream production and manufacturing without creating long-term effects. And society throughout the world has not experienced the effects of what is coming. You might say that off on the horizon is a tsunami, which is heading towards virtually every country in the world. And the ones that will suffer the least are the third world countries, okay, because they are already hardened to this type of living. But in a Western society, it will be much harder. And so when we see, what happened with the toilet rolls, and the biffos over toilet rolls and all the rest of it, if there was a situation with the supply of food, or any of these types of things, then that's going to be amplified greatly. So anyway, what happened was, because of the way that we normally work with these system-based situations where the system comes at you, normally the system comes at you and they have solicitors in the back end of it, and they come at such a fast rate and the community can't react, all right? And so what happens then is that the legals are in there behind them to support them, and anyone that's a problem, so with the league, with the solicitors and the media and all the rest of it, it's very, very tough in the community. So traditionally what we've done is we've used a system that's already in place to start, to have, let's say, put in place a moratorium. Now, the Northern Rivers, that's exactly what I did. I stood before the council, I explained to them exactly what was going on. We got a 90-day moratorium, and then we went to work at a grassroots level to basically get the community up to speed with what was coming, and inform them, and then basically the marches just became bigger and bigger. What we did was we formed a professional panel, so we had people like, Drew Hutton from Off the Gate, we had Jerry Buckingham from the Greens, we had people from the scientific side of things that we could actually explain all the chemicals and so on were going to do to the water system and one thing and another. And it was a success story. It really went down well. But first and foremost, as I said to Drew years ago, if we don't do, whether we win or lose, the beauty of this is that we're going to galvanise the community, and that was the beauty of it. For anyone that actually went along to any of those, marches and all the rest of it, you would have seen hippies and cowboys and surfers and everyone in there, having a crack. And so what we did was, what we were going to do is we had all these executives, and we were going to take these executives and put them in key positions and basically create an online corporate structure of management with these professionals all over the world, and then the various different communities and people would get in underneath them, and we could shepherd them towards a successful type situation. So why was the actual vision or the white paper that I presented to these fellas taken so seriously? It was taken so seriously because what I did was I put to the business community, guys, because in those days we really didn't know how intense things could become. We didn't know whether we had 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years. So we had to sort of say to ourselves, well, what happens if the bomb falls out of the bucket very quickly? How are we going to shore up the community? And no one had a solution except the one that I put forward. Because what happens is that we would teach the local community to grow seedlings, as an example, which we show you how to do that. Then you plant those seedlings, and so from the point of planting the seed to actually having a seedling to plant in the ground is 30 days. Within 30 days, 60% of whatever it is that you plant is ready to eat or sell, right? And also, so there is, coming from a farming background, and almost any farmer that you speak to, whether they're in the dairy or they're in market gardens or whatever, we always have an abundance of produce. We always have more than we can sell, and so sometimes it turns into compost and one thing and another. But so what we did was, I massaged I would have liked to have seen this actual program, sort of on the road 3 years ago, but we actually launched it 6 months ago. And in hindsight, there's a reason for everything. Okay, everything happens in the time that it's meant to happen, right? And so I'm more like a kind of a tool, if you like. Okay, and I'm just guided through this process of what's necessary to be done. All right. So whoever adopts this particular vision, if you like, it will never ever be about me. It's about you guys. Okay, and that's what's really. I want to try and move people away from mainstream agriculture into biological farming or organic farming. What I want to try and do is to move society away from the destructive, sort of industrial systems that we've been working with in agriculture, medicine, and all the rest of it into nature-based sciences. Okay, and so how are we going to do that? Well, basically, the way that what we're proposing is this. Initially, the way that it was going to happen was there'd be 3 garden beds that would be set up in people's gardens in their backyards or whatever, and you have 100. You might have 20 or 30 of these, and okay, this lady over here, she's just going to be growing broccoli, and this man here's going to be growing civil beet, and he's going to be growing that. And then what would happen is someone would come along, collect all of that up, take it to the market and sell it. But we've modified and we've adjusted that program into a more sort of community type situation. And so what happens is we're now putting up these little commercial nurseries. We call them micro nurseries. Okay? But the nurseries themselves are actually built to a commercial standard. So the nurseries that I previously was involved in from an agricultural point of view and so on, they were 300 square metre nurseries and 500 square metre nurseries. These little nurseries, they're more like 4 metres by 10 metres, 40 square metres. But you're not pigeonholed into that size, but that's sort of the idea, right? So the model is based on a 10 metre by 10 metre by 4 metre nursery, which gives you a footprint of 40 square metres. Within that nursery, you can hold, if you were going to retail all of those seedlings, right, from a profitable perspective coming back to you in terms of turnover, okay, it would be worth about $12,000 to you as a community, whoever's involved in that, right? But that's not what's envisaged, because there are multiple ways of being able for you to generate income. So, if you go to a farmer's market or you create your own farmer's market for the island or whatever, you might potentially sell those little punnets of seedlings for $4 to the local. But if you were selling them, let's say, we show you how to grow what's called open pollinated, non-hybrid, non-treated heirlooms. So who knows what that means? Okay, well, for those that don't, as an heirloom grower, what I am is I'm a custodian of the seed. So it means that the seeds that we're growing from are the same seeds that were grown 700 years ago. They've never been doctored, they've never been messed with or anything else, and they will produce an offspring. Right? So unlike your genetically modified or hybridised plants or any of those sort of things, what you'd be doing is you'd be eating broccoli the same as the broccoli they were eating 700 years ago. Right, so the work that I've done is very, very important, because what I'm doing is I'm being a custodian of the seed as well as being able to, grow something that's healthy for the environment as well as the humans. All right. So, what we teach you to do is we teach you to grow commercial, retail quality seedlings. A portion of those you will put into the garden, right? There may be a community garden, and I would probably recommend that initially, okay, so that if wherever you put your nursery, if you can have a little garden that's close to it, it doesn't have to be that big, okay? But you have a garden that's there, and then what you do is you take a portion of those seedlings and you plant them out in the garden, then you've got to feed, right? And depending on how many people are actually feeding from the garden, you'll have excess veggies to sell or to give to those that are less, the disadvantaged in society, if you like, right? But in addition to that, let's say as an example, you had your 12,000 odd, you had your seedlings there, which would be about the equivalent of around about 200 odd trays of seedlings, okay? You're only going to use a third of those in the garden that would probably be 30 metres by 30 metres. You only use a third of those. So the rest of those seedlings are then ready to be sold. So they are income producing as well. So what you have is you have a food security for the people who are actually growing the vegetables,